So what do we do? And that's saying the same thing to you. What do you do? So ejaculation is biological. It's not a glucose level, right? It was never meant to be analyzed. We talked that there's a great variability, daily, weekly, seasonal, annually. Seasonal. When are the highest sperm counts in men? Which season? No. Yes. Second is spring. Fall is the highest spring. So winter tends to be a good time, right? Because you're kind of honking down and yeah, blood heat. So it's interesting and it's pretty impressive. So you see a lot of spring babies and summer kids born, right? In and of itself, except when zero, it's not a great measure of actual fertility, right? So I should have demonstrated that today. So here's the way I do it. I look at it as a hand of cards. Each card has its own value, face value, but together they also mean something else, right? So gin rummy, right? Or poker, right? So you look at each one and then you step back and you look at the hand. So let's go through the cards. And the blog on this is called Reading Your Cards. TurekBlog.com or Turek blog on Google. Just search Turek blog. Check out the new site. Went up last week. So volume, it's total amount of fluid in the sample. It's from 3 sources. We talked about it. It varies widely with ejaculatory frequency. So unless you're 18 years old and you ejaculate daily, if you ejaculate daily, your volume will drop, right? Because it takes about 2 days to reconstitute it all and get it filled up again. When it's high, it doesn't have clear clinical meaning. So a high semen volume is not a clear clinical issue. When it's low, you can count on it. Something's going on. So I would say so if you're doing a semen analysis, I'd say rather than the count, I would refer someone for the low volume because I will find something every time. I will be able to nail that. Causes of low ejaculate volume, here's your mnemonic, real. It's real. Retrograde ejaculation, ejaculatory duct obstruction, absent vas deferens, low testosterone, or collection error. So you get a second one. If it's low too, probably have to rule out collection error, especially if he asked him if it hit the wall and he says no. I mean, but you know, it's hard to do when you have to think about it all of a sudden for the first time, right? Because you never thought about it before and I gotta stop, I gotta collect it now. So give him, it's called first sample syndrome. That's what I call it. You know, give him a second one, make sure. But if it's 2, then it's probably real. And occasionally men can just have a bit of a low volume at 1.5, but not 0.8. That's not normal for anybody. You can be at the low end of normal and be normal, but when you're that low. So concentration, so those are real. I mean, volume is real. I had 3 guys last week, ejaculatory duct obstruction. Diagnosed it on ultrasound, curative, I cure them. Surgery. Sperm count is actually a concentration, right? So it's not just a number, but we call it count. When it's high, meaning unclear, 10 minutes. When it's low, it's usually significant. So you got to think of the count as a biomarker, okay? We've been spending the last 10 years trying to convince people low count's a biomarker. You're meant to go hard. It's meant to run at full tilt. If it's not running full tilt, something's keeping it down, right? Closest thing to a biomarker, influenced by lifestyle, alcohol, hot baths, obesity, diet, disease, fever, stress, medications, varicocele infection, everything, right? So life influences the sperm count, right? It's a bigger hit. So here's my view of sperm counts. Basically, it's the world, sleep, diabetes, genetics, obesity, heart disease, medications, stress, low testosterone, prolactin, varicocele, injury, surgery, medications, epigenetics, everything. It's a biomarker of health. So it's part of health. Think about it. So when you see a guy with low sperm count is confirmed, you ask, what's going on in his life? What's he doing? Because it should be running harder and faster than that. What's he smoking? What's he soaking in? Something. Find it. You got to find it. If you can't find it, you send them to me. I'll have a varicocele. I've seen it. It's great. Because you guys work out the diet, the stress, the lifestyle. You got them all they're like in perfect shape, and I find a varicocele. So I got to publish that because it's wild. Motility. I think motility is a marker. So it's the one you want to be normal. It matters most to fertility, right? Because if they're all dead, they're not going to fertilize. But a small number of moving sperm can do the job. So that's important. It's a more sensitive indicator of insults to the body than the count. So think of this as low motility only, which is 26% of semen analyses. What's he doing wrong recently? What's he smoking? Did he have a fever? Was he in a hot tub? Something that may have been temporary. And if it's a longer, more durable hit or more severe hit, the count will fall. So think of motility as the easiest barometer of health, and count as the barometer of something long-term that's going on. Or genetics, so long-term is genetics too. It responds more rapidly to correction, more variable, and it's the same thing that affects count, but at less of a dose. So the dose-dependent thing. So I look at the volume and I look at the motility. And then I spend my time figuring out what they're doing. And they can also have anti-sperm antibodies or genetic. I found a guy with a genetically low motility last week. So 1 in 50,000. I get about 2 a year. Nothing to explain it. The motility is under 10%, which is really hard to do consistently. And I found he has a ciliary defect. There's 300 genes that control it, and I can't do anything about it. It's genetic. So he's going to need IVF. Morphology, forget about it. Here it is, actuarial analysis of sperm. It's said to reflect the fertilizability of sperm with IVF. That's why it was designed. It was read. IVF patients had a semen analysis. They put the slide aside. This is Kruger in Africa. And then they did IVF. They looked at the results and found that if the population of sperm has a morphology below 14% normal by very strict criteria, again, ordering the universe, then they wouldn't fertilize well. Now that's 4% 30 years later. Why? Because here's morphology. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Everyone's reading them so strictly, nothing's normal anymore. So it's all shifting to the left, and now it's unreadable. When I was a professor at UCSF, I took a slide from a patient with a morphology of 6% in my lab, and my technically trained annually in this because it's really hard to do. It's much harder than a semen analysis. And I sent it to 6 labs, 6 IVF groups over a year. The same slide came back. And it was bell curve 6, 0 to 20. No one read 6. And I said, it's not very good. So the question is, what does it mean? So it has very little to do with the payload. So the shape of the sperm has very little to do with the genetics, miscarriages, funny looking kids, very little to do with that, okay? To me, it reflects stress. What's going on with the guy? Because the most common pattern is a stress pattern. And a stress pattern is a head that's a little fatter, a little narrower, and anything can do that. Cigarette smoking, varicocele, heat, a flu, because this, basically the system's overheated a little bit and it comes out and it's quite malleable, it's not permanent, etc. So everyone thought it reflected the genetic shape, but it doesn't. It's a lot more complicated than that. However, so this is the curve that he had back then with 4%, now 4% normal. And so I don't routinely order this anymore because it doesn't reflect fertilizability. It doesn't correlate to natural pregnancy rates. It doesn't correlate to IUI pregnancy rates. It doesn't really correlate to IVF failure. So Jamie Griffiths published that about 10 years ago. He said, what if we didn't look at morphology and just did IVF regardless of that based on other parameters and ICSI? Because right now, if it's below 4%, you buy ICSI, right? That's because this can fail. You can fail to fertilize. That happened in 1 in 250 cases, which is about the same it would happen if you looked at it, right? So it's not a good indicator of fertilizability the way it's currently done. If you talk to Menkfeld and Kruger, they'll stick to it. It's really great for us because they're really good at it and they invented it and they're very strict and they're consistent, but it's not teachable. So the biggest problem is you get 1% on your report. I don't really care about that. I care about the 99. What's in the 99? What do they look like? Do they have two tails? Are they pinheads? So I can remember 2 semen analyses last year that were truly abnormal, and they were genetic. And so if it's syndromic, so the blog is called The Genetics of Headless Sperm. If it's syndromic, meaning every single sperm looks the same in that abnormal group, and they all are, lollipop sperm, double-tailed sperm, and it's all the same, then that is syndromic, and that's real. But that's really unusual, and the lab usually picks it up saying these sperm look like boom, right? So it's a consistency of it. That's when it matters. But my opinion changed because we published a paper last year putting sperm through microfluidic channels to develop a chip to select a better sperm. And it's on the market. Disclosure, I'm a board member, but it's called Zymot Fertility Chip. And now it's based on this science, which is a microfluidics, a nerd from Stanford named Dr. Uktan Demirci did this study, and he put sperm through a confined channel like the cervical path, and ran it through and looked at the quality of the sperm before and after you putting through this 1 centimeter path, which is now a chip. And they're much better at this end. But what was more interesting to me was that only normal sperm made it. So sperm shape does matter in the cervical path, because if you look bad, bent neck, large head, you'll never make it. You'll never make it. You can't swim it. It's not, the path is too complicated. The cervical grooves are too complicated. So yeah, it probably matters to getting to the egg, probably matters a lot. But after that, probably not. So what about a normal semen analysis and unexplained infertility? So maybe our guy has unexplained infertility. Well, this is my view of unexplained infertility and the risk of male factor. So male factor on the left, infertility condition on the X. And if you're fertile, there is no male factor, right? If you have unexplained infertility, 1 year of trying, everyone's normal, probably 25% of those cases are male, right? If you fail IUI, it's probably 30. If you fail IVF, it's probably 40. If you fail IVF and you have euploid embryos, it's probably higher. That's probably underestimating it. And if you failed IVF with a donor egg, it's probably even higher, right? So I don't know where the last 3 are, but they're not going to be lower than the other ones. That's a big chunk of infertility, right? That's just probably male. We don't know yet. So we can do this. We can dive deeper with DNA fragmentation. So I do this a lot because I don't assume it's normal. And so if you say, well, you're normal, so you're normal, you're fertile, that's probably incorrect. You should go deeper. And your DNA can be fragmented. Fertile men typically don't have it. Infertile men with normal semen analyses, about 10% have this problem. Infertile men with abnormal semen analyses, about 20%. This is Armanzini's work in Canada. But it's elevated in being infertile, being older, having a varicocele, exposures, same thing that affects motility, a lot of these, and abstinence. Abstinence can do it. The blog is called It Takes Two to Tango. And if you look at the age, think of fragmentation rate sort of 15% or 20% is normal or below. Add about 1% per year of age over 30, and it goes up like that with age. So 25% of 40-year-olds looks like around 50, 60-year-olds, 50% of 50-year-olds. I mean, it goes up quite a bit. It's almost logarithmic. So these are the things that affect sperm that in a way that's independent of the semen analysis. Epigenetics, great science, kind of out of commission because the test that is off the market now, but it'll be back. So you heard it here first. I wouldn't let it go. But this is probably what's going to explain a lot of stuff because we're very epigenetically similar to bananas, but we don't look like one. And we're finding that there's a lot of data. Semen parameters are associated with alterations in the epigenome. This is one study we did with a group from Episona, but we found that if your sperm count's below 13 million versus a guy with 100 million, you have certain genes that are affected by that epigenetically, meaning they're not mutations, not chromosomal issues. This is just the marks on the DNA. They should be expressed and they're not. Or they're not expressed and they should be. One of those two. It's markings on the DNA, very subtle, new science, explaining a lot of things, diet and lifestyle influenced. So same with low motility versus normal motility. There are suspected gene regions. Epigenetics is probably going to explain most of what we don't understand about unexplained infertility and an abnormal semen analysis. And everything else, including IUI failure, IVF failure, poor embryo development. It's going to go through everything. So what influences epigenetics? Everything. Diet, lifestyle, medications. Long enough. It's got to be a long enough hit, right? Obesity. Did you see the study on obesity? Take heavy men, give them gastric banding surgery, they lose 100 pounds, and check their sperm counts before and after, but maybe a year later, their epigenetic profile is entirely different on their sperm. That's transmissible stuff. That goes to the next generation. So a semen analysis is a good biomarker of health. Take that home. Look at their health. You have to look at the individual as a whole individual. It's possible to figure out what's going on. I rarely can explain a semen analysis in my practice right now. Maybe 5% of the time. Remember last week I said, I'm not sure what's happening here. I wouldn't prolong it. I would just go to IVF. I think of IVF, you know, Dr. Mars was here and stuff, and Bayolis, but I think of it as I lost, right? Got to go to IVF. Normal may still be infertile, abnormal may still be fertile. And that's it.